All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Really appreciate you all joining us for the SQ Replacement Names Best Practices webinar hosted by the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names. I really appreciate you all spending your time with us this morning to hear about the next steps of the implementation of this new law. And we're really excited to be able to connect with you all and answer any questions you have on AB 2022 implementation and the renaming of SQ places and features across the state of California. So again, appreciate your all's time. I know you have very busy schedules, and it means a lot to us that you would log in today for our best practices webinar. So before we get started in the meat of everything, I would love to take a quick opportunity to introduce you all to the team here at the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names, as well as the California Natural Resources Agency. And so to kick us off, we'd love to introduce you to our Manager of Geographic Names, Mary Barkosky, who is our champion and our lead person in helping us implement AB 2022, renaming of SQ features and places, as well as helping manage and run the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names. So Mary, hand it off to you for your introduction.
Good morning. I'm honored to be a part of this and have really enjoyed when I've spoke with people or when we've emailed back and forth. And I'm just really excited for this project to replace these SQ names. So just reach out anytime that a question comes up. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Next, it's my honor to introduce our chairperson, Richard Liss, who is chairing the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names and providing such thoughtful and guidance and leadership through AB 2022 implementation. So Chair Liss.
Oh, thank you, Geneva. Yeah, welcome to our, first outreach for public agencies on our AB 2022 and removing SQ from the landscape. Our committee has certainly been working hard on this for probably close to 16 or 18 months now. So we've had some tight deadlines and been compiling all kinds of lists, and Marie has worked furiously to work on an amazing number of names and paring the list down. So our committee's worked really hard, and particularly our Geneva's led us well and giving us terrific advice. So welcome to this, and I think we're on a good roll and moving ahead nicely. So welcome to our first webinar. Thank you. Back to you, Geneva.
Thank you, Chair Liss. And next, we'd love to introduce our new Deputy Director for Tribal Affairs, Megan Fleer. Megan?
Busan Sega. Good morning, everyone. My name is Megan. I am the new Deputy Director for Tribal Affairs at CNRA. I have the pleasure of working with Marie and Geneva, and hopefully you, Richie, as well soon. I'm excited to be here supporting this effort, and I'm really looking forward to working with you all in the coming months. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Megan. And then it's a true honor to be here with you all this morning. And for those I haven't had the pleasure of just meeting yet, my name is Geneva E.B. Thompson, a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, she, her pronouns, and very honored to serve as the Deputy Secretary for Tribal Affairs at the California Natural Resources Agency, and also the agency's liaison, I guess you could say, to the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names. And so it's a true honor to work closely with the committee members on AB 2022 implementation. And also it's a true honor to work closely with you all as leaders in your public agencies in the identification of SQ names, as well as this next step of working closely with public and local communities, as well as consultation with California Native American tribes on the identification of replacement names for these SQ places and features. So thank you for indulging us for a quick moment of introduction. It's a powerful team that we have here at agency as well as through the committee, and they're doing a lot of great work and are here to be a resource and support you all as we go through AB 2022 implementation. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions and if we could be a resource throughout this process. So for the agenda for our webinar, we have some information about AB 2022, as well as next steps. In in the implementation of the new law, and as well, and then we will go into kind of best practices, guidance, information as you all move into the next phase of your community engagement and tribal consultations in the implementation of the new law. And then we're hoping to spend some time at the end, just a Q&A. If you can look on the Zoom link, there is a Q&A button where you can type in your questions, and either somebody from the team will answer them live in that chat, or at the end of the webinar, we will announce the questions and then kind of provide an answer live. And so as I go through this PowerPoint, please put your questions in that Q&A feature. If we don't get to it by the end of the webinar, we can follow up and answer any questions you might have in that feature. So please use that feature and we will get you the information that you need. So as a very quick introduction, the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names provides recommendation and advice to the U.S. Board of Geographic Names on proposed names to be used on maps published by federal agencies within California. So U.S. Board of Geographic Names is the federal agency that does the renaming efforts for places and features under federal jurisdiction. And the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names provides recommendations and advice to that federal committee. Our committee consists of representatives from a bunch of different departments underneath the California Advisory Committee on under the California Natural Resources Agency's umbrella. So you have the Department of Water Resources, Department of Parks and Rec, Fish and Wildlife, Department of Conservation, Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, the Native American Heritage Commission, California State Libraries, and California African American Museum. And so these departments have representatives on the committee and serve as our experts in going through these recommendations and providing advice to this federal body. More information on the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names can be found on our website, and so please feel free to check that out if you have any questions about the committee itself. Highlighted this a little bit already, but the U.S. Board of Geographic Names is, again, that federal body that was established under public law in 1947 to maintain uniform geographic name usage throughout the federal government. And so, again, the California Advisory Committee of Geographic Names provides that advice and support to that federal body as it relates to renaming efforts within the state of California. The bill that we are here all meeting on today is AB 2022, which on September 23rd of 2022 was signed into law, which declared the SQ term a racist and derogatory term that has historically been used as an offensive ethnic, racial, and sexist slur, particularly to Indigenous women. In this bill, it mandates the removal of the SQ term from all California geographic features and place names, and also designates the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names with the implementation of this bill to serve as a coordinating role, to partner with public agencies across the state of California in developing processes and identifying SQ names, and then working closely in partnership with public agencies on identifying respectful renaming of these features. And so we're very honored that the law designated the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names to serve in this role. And we're very honored to partner with you all as you go through this process and identifying those respectful replacement names. A little bit of background. The federal body that we mentioned earlier in the webinar, the U.S. Board of Geographic Names, in partnership with the Department of Interior and a renaming task force, went through a process of identifying all SQ named features that are under federal jurisdiction and went through a process of renaming those features back in 2021 through 2022. And so that work was led by the Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland, through her Secretary Order 3404. And that process went through that the federal kind of agency's purview and work and renamed all of the features under federal jurisdiction a couple years back. And so when we're thinking about SQ terms in the state of California, And we've had a lot of identification of those federal features throughout our process. And that's why you're not seeing those features on the final list that we've published, because the federal government has already accomplished the renaming efforts in those spaces. And so the leadership of the secretary and her team in going through that identification and renaming process has already been completed. And AB 2022 is looking at those features and places that were not completed through that federal process. Assemblymember James Ramos strengthened kind of this direction through AB 2022 when writing and working to have AB 2022 passed through our state processes. And again, designated the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names to be the one to implement that new legislation and work in partnership with public agencies across the state in the identification and renaming of SQ terms that are not in the federal process. So we're very excited about the opportunity to partner with you all as we implement this new law, and also to engage in early, often, and meaningful tribal consultation in the identification and proposal of respectful replacement names for these places and features. We're also really looking forward to partnering with you all in the local community public engagement process. We know local communities have a deep connection to place names, and that only through conversation and community engagement can we respectfully identify replacement names for these SQ places and features across the state of California. So really appreciate you all spending your morning with us. And please know that we want to be collaborative, helpful partners as we go through this process. Something that I always think is helpful when talking about AB 2022 is to pull out some of the key definitions of terms that you'll be hearing and using throughout the implementation of this new law. There's other definitions in the law. I encourage you to take a look at it, but we thought these 4 terms would be really helpful as we think about implementation moving forward. So a feature under AB 2022, the new state law, means any location or publicly owned structure in California, including but not limited to navigable waters of the state, geographic features, parks, state or local roads, bridges, and publicly owned buildings. The definition of place means any natural geographic feature or street, alley, or other road within the jurisdiction of the state or political subdivision of the state. The third term, public agency, means any state agency, local governing body, and any other political subdivision of the state. And then the last key term that we wanted to highlight in today's webinar is, what does formal consultation mean? Because we know a huge component of AB 2022 implementation is that early, often, and meaningful tribal consultation to ensure that we are identifying replacement names that are respectful of tribes and tribal communities. And so this formal consultation means the meaningful and timely process of seeking, discussing, and considering carefully the views of others in a manner that is cognizant of all parties' cultural values, and where feasible, seeking agreement. Consultation between government agencies and Native American tribes shall be conducted in a way that is mutually respectful of each party's sovereignty. Consultation shall also recognize the tribe's potential needs for confidentiality with respect to places that have traditional tribal cultural significance. And so in your tribal consultations, a tribal leader, a cultural leader might say, we need to share some information with you, but we need it to be kept confidential because it identifies a sacred place or it has significance to a tribal community that they would like to protect, and would ask for your help and your partnership in keeping that information confidential. When I start tribal consultations, I always ask, is this a confidential information? Is this something that we need to have heightened protections around that you're sharing with us today? And tribal leaders, cultural leaders really appreciate that when you ask them that question as a way of showing that you understand this information is sensitive and that confidentiality is a very important aspect of respectful consultation with the tribe. So I hope that these key terms and the definition of these key terms is helpful as you're kind of thinking through next steps in the implementation of AB 2022. Here we have a lovely timeline that Marie put together for us to help kind of provide a visual of like where we are in the process, right? So July 2023, we appreciate your partnership in identifying and filing a report to the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names with all of the SQ named places and features within your all's jurisdiction. Thank you so much for submitting those applications, or excuse me, those files. It really helped us in identifying where the scope of work is across the state of California, and really helped us identify what templates and support that we can provide as you go through this process. We had a public comment and tribal consultation period on kind of best practices, as well as the identification of those SQ terms. And this last was it only a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, we were very honored to have the completed list of SQ names and places and features across the state. We have that published on our website. You all should have received that in your emails. And this is basically, this is the universe of renaming efforts that we collectively get to work on for the remainder of the year. So hopefully you have seen that. If not, please email us and we will get that to you. But really, this is the kickoff of the next phase of AB 2022 implementation. So we respectfully ask, this is the moment to get your tribal consultation letters out. This is the moment to start doing that public engagement and really starting that conversation on what is a respectful renaming proposal that can be put together that reflects the values of your community, that reflects and shows respect to California Native American tribes in your region. So we're in the very early phases of that, but now is the time to get that outreach going, and we're here to support you along the way. We do know that tribes need a good amount of time to receive requests for consultation letters and respond and provide thoughtful, helpful responses in this process. And so we do ask if you could get your tribal consultation letters finalized and sent before March 7th. That will give tribes enough time to be able to process that request and respond. We've already done a little bit of early legwork to let tribes know that the list is out. They should be looking for letters from public agencies. And so they should be aware that a letter is coming. But we are also here to help make connections if that's something that's helpful and needed. But again, March 7th, I think is kind of the last time to get that letter out to be able to engage in early, often and meaningful tribal consultation. So as you're thinking kind of next steps, I would recommend finalizing your tribal consultation letters and getting those out the door as quickly as possible. So from now until August 6th, we are very excited to partner with you all on your public engagement, on your tribal consultations, to identify those respectful replacement names and putting together those proposals. And August 6th is the deadline to submit those proposals to the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names. And so from February, to August, we're hoping that you have plenty of time to do those engagements, those tribal consultations, to put together those proposals and submit them to CACGN. If you're running into any hiccups or something surprise moment happens, please just communicate with us. Let us know what the on the ground reality looks like for you all. We want to be flexible. We want to support you. And so the more dialogue and communication you can provide on where you are in your process would be really appreciated. And we can build in and try to support as much as possible. We are then hoping to get through all of those renaming proposals, process them through kind of our internal process, and we're shooting for an October-ish meeting to finalize those proposals. And with the hope that we have plenty of time to meet our January 1st, 2025 deadline of having all SQ names renamed before the new year. And this deadline is set by the statute. So AB 2022 requires us to meet this deadline of January 1st, 2025. And so we're shooting to meet that deadline and really appreciate your partnership and help as we keep that deadline in mind. So that's what we are forecasting for the rest of the year. Hopefully we built in enough time that feels good and helpful for you all as you go through this renaming process. But again, please let us know if you are seeing something or running into anything that we should be aware of. So the name proposal checklist, again, Marie works some magic, created a beautiful document, a beautiful checklist that we hope is a helpful template for you all as you're thinking about implementation of AB 2022, and is a way of recording all of the information that we're going to need to process your renaming proposals. And so that workbook, that checklist, we hope is a helpful tool. If you have any questions on that checklist, please put it in the Q&A. Please email us and we'll be happy to help walk you through that. But overall, we're hoping that you can fill in those checklists within, and see this as kind of like your renaming proposal document, right? And this is going to be all the background information to support that renaming proposal. We do ask that you use the checklists and the information and fill in the blanks as much as possible, and to keep the tabs in their original format and original order, because that's going to just help us streamline your proposals and help us meet that deadline. There are drop-down menus to select different options in that Excel sheet, so please feel free to use that. We try to make this as simple as possible because we know you have very busy schedules, so we try to make it easy for y'all. And then there are spaces that are provided in this checklist to record the tribal consultations that you've engaged in, the public engagement meetings or community outreach events that you've hosted. And there's also a place to record what comments have been received, because we know that these renaming proposals, it's a community effort, right? And so we wanted to create a space where you could record what you're hearing from your all's communities. So really hope that this is a user-friendly form for you all, and that it will help in the implementation of AB 2022. And again, that form has been emailed to you all in your packets, and it also can be found on our website if you need a copy of that form. So we have many opportunities for collaboration. I think we've talked about this a lot already, so I'm going to quickly go over this, but really this is an opportunity for formal consultation with California Native American tribes. This is a great opportunity to engage with the local community, the public, having a public comment process, really to have a robust community-led renaming effort for these SQ features and places across the state of California. Appreciate your all's leadership, appreciate your all's partnership in this process. So moving forward, the workbook, the checklist that we just mentioned, please use that tool to submit your replacement names and your proposals to the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names. That is our email address. That's the best place to send your questions and your proposal forms to have it go through the final process. So the law also again, calls out that before selecting a replacement name, public agencies need to engage in formal consultation of California Native American tribes on the appropriate replacement name. And so we're hoping this next part of the webinar is to share some best practices that we've picked up on and we've learned in our own tribal consultations. So formal consultation with California Native American tribes requires a timely process for seeking, discussing, and carefully considering the views of others in a manner that's cognizant of all parties' cultural values and where feasible to seek agreement. Consultations should be conducted in a way that's mutually respectful, should recognize tribes' potential needs for confidentiality, and really should meet this early, often and meaningful policy goals of tribal consultation. So formal consultations must occur early in the decision-making process. Communication and consultation meetings should take place often with regular updates on topics and in consultation. So again, we do hope that you all can have a moment to finalize your request for tribal consultation letters. Murray put together a beautiful template letter for you all. Please use that. Please modify it as needed to meet your specific needs. But we hope that that kind of helped with some of the lift in getting these letters together. And just ask that those letters go out before March 7th, and the sooner the better, right? It's also a really good best practice to follow up with emails and phone calls with your tribal partners. So as a kind of a best practice, tribes do prefer that snail mail, that hard copy letter. That's important for a lot of tribes. Not every tribe operates the same, but for a lot of tribes, that helps with their internal review process. But just as everyone is aware, sometimes friendly reminder emails helps. Maybe friendly phone calls helps in kind of keeping a process moving forward. And so please feel free to reach out to your tribal partners to follow up on your request for consultation letter, to identify opportunities to meet, to have these discussions on the renaming efforts. It's also really important to be aware that every single tribe is their own government, and they have their own priorities, they have their own internal processes, and they might have their own opinions on the renaming effort. And so it's good to schedule one-on-one consultations with tribal leaders, with cultural leaders on this process to fully understand what the tribe's priorities are and what their hopes are in this renaming effort. And so after you have those one-on-one consultations, after you have some understanding and guidance around where tribes are in this process, you can then offer, if it's helpful in your process, you can offer to host an intertribal roundtable conversation. And that's a way of having all the tribal governments in attendance with your public agency to have a kind of a group conversation around what would be a respectful replacement name for the place and feature. Some tribes like that roundtable setting, some tribes do not, right? And it's only, you can make the offer, you can suggest it if that's something that you think is going to help advance your renaming proposal. And just know some might take you up on it and some might not. And that is completely fine. And that gets to the part of respecting each party's sovereignty or authority, because every government operates differently, and that applies with tribes as well. We are also aware that there have been questions around what happens if multiple tribes have different names that they would like to propose in this renaming effort. How do we build consensus? How do we kind of land on one name? And that's when I would suggest this roundtable, intertribal roundtable suggestion, and saying like, hey, we've received multiple, proposal names. Can we all meet together and see if one really resonates with everyone that we can then submit to CACGN? I also recommend kind of when you are thinking about your tribal consultations after you sent your letter, but before your one-on-one meeting, it's kind of good to do a little background research. I recommend, looking up the tribe's website, see who the leadership is, see who the chairperson is, the tribal council members, if they have a cultural committee, who the cultural committee leader is, and do some kind of research and know who your partners are before you go into that meeting. The one-on-one tribal consultation meetings are more formal meetings. Tribal councils are the decision-making body of many tribes. And if you are meeting before the council, know that that's a formal meeting, right? And so just, recommend treating it as a formal meeting. I'm sure many of you all are used to presenting before board supervisors or city councils, and just recommend kind of keeping that type of formality that you would with your decision makers as the same as the decision makers of tribal governments. As it relates to tribal consultations, know that it could take a couple back and forth to schedule the meetings. You might need to have multiple meetings to share information with tribal leadership and then have a conversation about what a respectful an appropriate replacement name would be for that tribe. And so just know you might be meeting with tribal leadership multiple times before kind of getting to that end result. And that's why we really are stressing getting your request for consultation letters out early, so you have plenty of time to do that work. It's also good to know that tribal leaders might have to rely on their elders or their cultural committee to identify an appropriate replacement name for a particular place. So that's going to take the tribe's time to meet with their elders to have those conversations before they have anything to respond to you all. And so just because you haven't heard from a tribe doesn't mean they're not reviewing your request for consultation letter, doesn't mean they're not starting that process. They just might be doing some of their own background, their own homework before responding. So if you haven't heard anything for a little bit, it's always just a friendly gesture to follow up with an email, follow up with a phone call, saying like, hey, we would really love to meet with you on this renaming proposal. And the checklist that Marie put together provides plenty of spaces to kind of mark when you've made phone calls or emails or sent letters as just like kind of a tracking measure to keep track of the tribal consultation outreach that you've done. So I hope those are some helpful best practices. Again, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature. We'll get to those at the end of the webinar, but wanted to just share kind of some of the common questions that we've been hearing so far as it relates to tribal consultations. So when we're thinking about respectful replacement names, the law directs all of us to think about respectful replacement names for these SQ places and features to prioritize names that honor and recognize the tribes, cultures, and indigenous languages specific to the geographic region in question. This includes place names that were previously used by Native American tribes or place names proposed by California Native American tribes through an appropriate enactment or resolution, right? And so the legislation, the new law is really encouraging this effort of prioritizing names that are proposed by tribes, that honor and respect tribes, their cultures, their languages, as a way of addressing historical wrongs. We know that throughout the history of California, through many different actions, tribes were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands. People were enslaved or killed or murdered throughout the history of California. And part of the goal that we have here at the Newsom administration, as well as part of the goal in AB 2022, is to understand those historical wrongs, understand those truths, and then identify ways to heal and move forward that is respectful and honoring of tribes and their connection to land, connection to culture, connection to language. And this is one opportunity where public, one of many, right? One of many opportunities that public agencies have to closely partner with tribes to understand that history, to understand those historical wrongs, and create a renaming proposal that moves forward in the truth and healing. In the spirit of that truth and healing to address those historical wrongs. So I hope that this is an exciting moment for you all in thinking about implementation of AB 2022. And I think it could be a beautiful moment to reconnect or strengthen partnerships with California Native American tribes in your region, in your area. And you know, the law is really encouraging that. And so the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names is also really encouraging that. And we're going to be looking for those types of partnerships, conversations. We're going to be looking at those renaming proposals to see if it meets this spirit, this call of the law, again, of prioritizing names that honor and recognize tribes, cultures, and indigenous languages specific to the geographic region in question. So please keep that in mind as you're going through your renaming efforts, as you're consulting with tribes and connecting with local community members. So after you submit your proposals, August 6th, that's the deadline. Please keep that in mind. After you submit those proposals, the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names is going to review those proposals, compare them to this, you know, the requirements under AB 2022 and work through the review and approval of those proposals. The law does authorize the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names to reject any proposal that the committee determines is not appropriate or is derogatory, offensive and doesn't fulfill the legislative intent of prioritizing names honoring tribes, cultures, and indigenous languages specific to the region. And so please please keep that in mind. The second half of this year, the committee is going to be reviewing these proposals, matching them up with the letter of the law, and we'll be in conversation with you all as we go throughout this process. And so really do appreciate the early, often, and meaningful tribal consultations that your public agencies will lead. Really do appreciate the public engagement and community work that is going to take in building out renaming proposal that reflects the values of your community, that respects and honors California Native American tribes and Native communities. So in the event that a public agency does not submit a renaming proposal by August 6th, or that the committee deems the proposal to be offensive or derogatory or otherwise inappropriate, the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names has been authorized under the law to then solicit renaming proposals and input from tribes, public agencies, and members of the public, and to engage in this process. And so we know that it's important that this is a public agency-led, community-led renaming efforts. But in the event that that effort isn't completed by August 6th, the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names is authorized to kind of step in and do that work. We do want to partner very closely with public agencies throughout this process. So again, if you are seeing things on the ground, please just be in active communication with us. We want to partner with you. We want this to be a community-led, a tribally led renaming effort. And so again, please be in active communication with us as you're navigating these next steps. To submit your renaming proposals, by August 6th, please again use the checklist that we discussed in the beginning of this webinar and email them to CACGN, CACGN @resources.ca.gov. That's the email address for all questions and submittals. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you've got any questions. So again, thank you so much for joining us this morning for the Best Practices webinar. We really appreciate your all's time. I see we have some questions in the Q&A box, so we'll get to those right now. But if you have any other questions, please submit them in that Q&A and we will get to them. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can have a full screen. There we go. All right.